We, I don't know, maybe my clock is wrong. I have 4:27. Nick, what do you think? Would you like to, shall we get started or do you want to give a couple more minutes?
Yeah, we could get started. So yeah, make sure that we have time at the end for Q&A.
Sure, great.
Okay.
Just FYI, feel free to ask any questions in the chat, and do feel free to continue to introduce yourselves as well until the speakers start. I won't be able to see chat because I'll be switching over to the presentation slide deck. There we are, bear with me for that. Folks did ask about live captions. We have that link in the chat, and Karen, if you could place that in the chat again, I would greatly appreciate it. You can reach that at any device with a web browser. It's streamtext.net/player?event=CDA. And our captioning is sponsored by McDonald's, so thank you very much, McDonald's. You can, of course, follow along with the slideshow on your own device and look for professional testers with disabilities. Just go to speakerdeck.com/A11Y-Chai. And of course, keep the discussions going on Twitter at A11Y-Chai or using the hashtag A11Y-Chai. We are live streaming this on YouTube, so hello to everybody on YouTube. You can ask questions through chat on YouTube as well. And if you would like to follow along with us on YouTube, it is youtube.com/A11Y-Chai. We do post the recordings from our meetup groups on there as well. So if you'd like to refer back to this talk or if you want to send that along to your friends, please feel free to do that. And I'm just screwing that up all of a sudden. Sorry for that. Just a reminder, if you prefer not to be in the recording, check your video and ensure that the camera is off. Hold questions for Q&A time after the presentation, unless it's a technical question, of course. The co-organizers will monitor the chats for technical issues and questions. Whoops, I don't know what's wrong with my mouse right now. Just want to take a pause right now for jobs. If you have any jobs at your company that you are listing specifically in accessibility or you're currently looking for a job, feel free to take yourself off of mute and mention it or feel free to drop it in the chat. So go ahead and pause right now for that. All right, if nobody's going to speak up, you still have the opportunity to drop that in the chat or you can mention that afterwards as well. And we do also want to take a brief mention to the current events. Obviously, it's very poignant and concerns a lot of us, and especially as accessibility professionals, we need to acknowledge that there are folks in our community that are being affected. So we do encourage you to check out the hashtags Disabled Black Talk and Disabled Black Lives Matter. Both of those are currently trending on Twitter right now. And with that, let's go ahead and introduce our speakers. Heather Burns. Heather's passion for accessibility started early, turning self-advocacy into a student-run organization to help others gain the accommodations they needed for academic success. At Microsoft, she worked on the accessibility of Windows and the Office family of products, becoming a co-inventor of UI automation, US patents, and you can look up those numbers. They're very difficult and very long. Heather is currently a full-time accessibility consultant for Equal Entry, a company founded by a former Microsoft accessibility peer, Thomas Logan, who I saw was also on our line. Equal Entry provides clients with accessibility expertise through audits, training, and expert witness testimony. John G. Samuel. John G. is an award-winning business development leader with over 13 years of experience building strategic partnerships, designing profitable business models, and transforming organizations around the world. He is currently the head of LCI Tech and responsible for launching the new technology services business for LCI, which is one of the largest employers of Americans who are blind. John has a proven record of accomplishment of leading startup initiatives, previously helping build Homestrings, a fintech platform focused on diaspora investments, and starting a highly successful joint venture in Cameroon for Aster, a global telecom infrastructure company. And without further ado, Heather and John, please go ahead and share your screen and take it away.
Well, awesome. Thank you so much for that introduction, and thank you all for inviting us to participate today at the Chicago Accessibility Meetup. My name is John Samuel, and I am the Chief Innovation Architect at LCI Tech. And we are a division of LCI, and we are the largest employer of Americans who are blind. And our whole mission at LCI Tech is to create careers for people who are blind in the knowledge economy. And my connection with the disability community started when I was diagnosed with a degenerating eye condition called retinitis pigmentosa when I was a freshman in college. And at the time, I didn't know anyone who was blind. And when I got this news, it was devastating, and it really shook my world. And I was ashamed to tell anyone. But I moved along with my career, and I moved around the world. And throughout that time, in different places, I was figuring out different ways to accommodate for myself. And I was figuring out ways with my limited diminishing eyesight. I was using larger text, using inverted colors. But eventually, my sight got to a point where I could no longer see the screen, and I had to use a screen reader. And the challenges that I was facing throughout my career, I realized the importance of accessibility. And so when I launched LCI Tech, I knew that accessibility was going to be something that we would need to address. And that's what we're doing. And but I'm joined here today with my friend and colleague, Heather Burns.
Thanks, John. So as kind of kicking off the way that we kicked off the morning today, so it was she, her is my pronouns. I'm in Charlotte, North Carolina. I didn't purchase it recently, but I'm finding that a gift from Christmas is a jogging leash for my dog, and that is providing me lots of stress relief as we get some jogs in, and she's just a lot nicer on that particular leash than others. So that is good. But as kind of alluded to, my journey with accessibility started pretty early. In fact, I don't remember a time really before I knew about my learning disability. So it was very much when I struggled academically, when I had some difficulties. My parents were always great supporters to be able to name what it is and be able to tell me, okay, so that just means you got to work harder and you might need some accommodations in order to be successful. So throughout my academic career, I was allowed to have accommodations, extra time, but one of the controversial accommodations I received was the ability to use a computer. Now, this was I could do spell checking, I could rearrange sentences, and I could craft essays using a computer a lot more efficiently than by hand. And at the time, you got to go back in the Wayback Machine. We're talking Apple IIe's. We're talking 5-inch floppy disks as far as storage, right? That the teachers didn't have much experience with computers, and they were concerned that if computers got into the classroom, that they wouldn't be able to identify what is unique student work. So it was really breaking ground with that, but I always kind of knew that a computer would help me. Then when I graduated, and it was like one of the early, so July '93, the New Yorker publishes this cartoon. And it's a depiction of a dog sitting at a computer. He's at a keyboard. He's looking down at another dog. And the caption is saying, on the internet, nobody knows that you're a dog. And this was done by Peter Steiner, excuse me. And for me, I can't remember who cut that out and gave it to me, but I remember laminating it and holding on to it because it was so powerful to me to think that, on a lot of levels, I can pass, I can be social, I can choose when I disclose about my learning disability. And if I stumble over it before I've told somebody about it, I get very self-conscious. If I run into it with a colleague that fully knows my background. I'm like, come on, you should know about this. So it became very big for me, the power that a computer could provide to anyone with a disability, so that all disabilities could be made to be invisible, and allow the individual to have the privilege and the honor to know they get to choose when to disclose. And I thought that was incredibly powerful. So it led me to the career of computer science and Microsoft, and kept me passionate about accessibility. So that's kind of my backstory. When we get into kind of why we're here, I know that some of my friends that I see on the Zoom meeting, so thank you for coming, have forwarded this to others that might not have the accessibility background. So I'm going to just do a quick background for those that might not be as versed as others on accessibility. But really, including individuals with disabilities in product testing is really the only way to truly validate that a product or a website is in fact accessible. You can use automated testing tools, and I love them. But if you build a reliance on automated testing tools, you can create a culture where developers are coding to pass a test and not to make it truly accessible. If you have, okay, fine, we'll just give developers screen readers. We'll give them voice dictation technology, Dragon, others. And the learning curve on those is pretty steep. So if you don't also include a significant amount of training, you end up with some unintentional consequences. And by that, I've seen it at least twice in the last year and a half, where a developer got a hold of a screen reader, and because they were tabbing between all the elements, they decided that everything needed a tab stop, and they were adding tab indexes to everything. And they spent so much time doing that and trying to do tab indexes in the right order and trying to all this stuff. They didn't do the request of connecting the label with the input and allowing the programmatic access. So here they thought they were doing this great thing. They didn't help screen reader users at all, and they just aggravated poor, the individuals that were using the keyboard, right? Your power users, as well as those that are sighted but physically use the keyboard rather than the mouse. And then finally, I just want to mention that there are some organizations that do a great job of hiring. They include individuals with disabilities on their team. We love seeing that, but that's not a replacement. Those team members, they grew up with the product. They know where all the mitigations are. They know where all the workarounds are, and they become expert power users without even knowing it. So they're not a true attestment to an individual with a disability being successful at your product. So I'm going to hand it back to John, but before I do, I want to give just some visuals as far as when we talk about usability. And John's going to go into this a little bit more, but I did some internet searches and I found this company. They're based in California, InterfaceAnalysis Associates. The only reason why I'm highlighting them is because they were kind enough to publish their pictures of their testing room. So this is very much the typical testing room that you would see. There's a desk that is a fixed height desk. There are chairs to allow you to adjust that at most. They can put paper on that desk, they can put a computer on that desk, but visually what you're seeing is tons of cameras around the room, from the ceiling, from the side, trying to get every angle to record when somebody enters this testing room, what they do. On the walls, you see a reflection, so you can see a mirror across one side and the reflection on the other side of the wall, there's another mirror. When we flip over and look at the client observation room, you realize that one of those giant mirrors is actually a one-way mirror. So you can have clients and the facilitators sit in this back room. There's a huge monitor that presumably shows all the pictures that are being, the cameras are capturing to allow you to kind of see what's going on within that testing environment. So this is, what I used Microsoft. This is a very typical kind of experience. So wanted to provide those visuals, but I'll hand it off to John.
Thank you, Heather. Yeah, so I mean, when I got into this field, I started wondering, why don't companies use people with disabilities in their usability testing? And I started asking this question to people and companies, and they would tell me, oh, we tried it, it just didn't work out. And you'd say, oh yeah, we just couldn't find really great test subjects. And I started wondering and asking myself, well, why are they not finding the test subjects? And I started thinking about it. They're looking out, they work 9 to 5, so they're looking for people who are available from 9 to 5. So they're looking out on the street, trying to grab somebody who has a disability or who's blind, and during those time hours. And and I started wondering, the reason why that person may be available is because they don't have a job. And maybe one of the reasons they don't have a job is because they don't necessarily have the technology skills to have a job. And so when they're trying to bring them in to do some usability testing, those folks just don't know how to use the system. And I just kind of stuck with me. And I started thinking about, what does an actual test environment look like? And I'm so happy that Heather was able to describe that, because that's what it is. You have to go to a test facility. You have to figure out transportation to that location. And then when you get there, you have to, the accommodations may not be accessible. You have to figure out, they have these fixed desks and chairs and these systems. I know for myself that I have my own computer set up and customized to my own specifications. And I know a lot of people who use assistive technology, they have it the same way. So when you get somebody off the street to come into one of these sterile environments and they have to set up their system to their own specifications, you're going to eat up a lot of that testing time. And so I can see that being major issues for not having great test subjects when you bring in people off the street. And then I started thinking about, what is it that the testing experience look like? Often the case, it's a written document with click here. And when we're designing these type of testing scenarios, it's important to think about the input devices and not make any assumptions, because you don't know what type of assistive technology or input devices that people are going to be using. But before we start to look at how to find test subjects for your usability testing, I think it's important to take a step back and take a look at, why was LCI formed? And so LCI was formed in 1936 by a local civic organization in Durham, North Carolina. And the civic organization saw that on the streets of Durham, there were a lot of people who were panhandling. And many of these folks had visual impairments. And so what they wanted to do was create employment opportunities for these individuals. And that's what the formation of LC Industries, which is now called LCI. But when we started to started the business, the first line of business was creating cane furniture, if you may remember those type of wicker type of chairs. And then we moved into mattresses. And these type of organizations were popping up all over the country. And the federal government took notice and started to procure products from these organizations. And today, LCI manufactures over 2,500 products. We have a footprint of 11 states. We have 8 manufacturing facilities, 50 retail locations, 2 distribution centers, and we employ over 800 people, and 400 of whom are blind or low vision. And so, when we start to look at this, this opportunity of LCI, we really were focused on manufacturing, retail, and distribution. But although manufacturing is a very noble profession, we realized that we needed to start thinking outside of those, because not everybody wants to go into this profession. So in 2017, the company realized that they wanted to create technology-based jobs. And so we launched what is now called LCI Tech. And so the whole purpose of this was really to create those knowledge-based jobs and careers. And when we started looking at the statistics, and I think that's where it was really important, that we really started making a decision based on the statistics that we had around the blind community. And in 2016, 7.2 million people identified with some sort of visual impairment. And it was 78% of people had a high school degree, 33% of people had some type of college higher education, and then only 15% had completed a bachelor's degree or higher. And then the real kicker was that only 29% had full-time jobs. And these numbers were really just like staggering, and we realized that we really had to do something. We had to do something. And so we started looking at the barriers that were standing in the way of people from pursuing these types of careers. And so we noticed that transportation has always been a barrier, which, as we all know, is crumbling every day as we live in the new normal. But we also noticed that education was a big challenge, and also accessibility. And so when I launched LCI Tech, I realized, as I mentioned, my own personal experiences, that we had to address the accessibility issue. But we knew we weren't going to be able to do this alone, and we needed to have partners to do this. So why am I talking about these stats and these barriers? Is because even though LCI had such a large number of employees, we had 400 people in our organization who were blind, we did some surveys, and I was really excited when I joined, because I looked at the results of these surveys, and I saw that there were so many people with college education. There were so many people who had great experience with computers, and I thought this was going to be the great foundation that we needed to launch LCI Tech. But as I started doing the assessments of these individuals who did stellar on the survey, I realized that a lot of these individuals had gone to college or had these prior careers in technology before they lost their vision. But once they lost their vision, many of them did not continue on with their education or continue with learning how to use assistive technology. And so we realized that we had to go outside and look externally for talent. And so today we have 10 people who are on the team at LCI Tech, 7 of whom are blind or low vision. But this took us we had to look external, and it took us some time to find. And so we did face challenges, and although we're always looking for new talent on the team, it's something that we've had to really work at to find people who fit the skill set that we were looking for to build up our organization. But with that, I'm going to pass it back to Heather.
Yeah. So really, I think it's what John's highlighting is the fact that finding the right participants are so key. So at Equal Entry, a lot of our clientele are looking for a specific persona, right? When they're developing their application or their website, they have in mind a specific persona. And I can use the example of Tableau. They're a company that is on our website and I work with. They are an enterprise level visualization product. They work with a large amount of data. They are a business tool. They want their primary persona is educated. So they want to include participants with disabilities that meet that education bar that would be business professionals utilizing their product. We need to make sure that they're proficient with computers. If we have a customer, even if it's a retail website, and no, their main persona doesn't require a college education, but they do expect computer proficiency, because if they don't have that from a usability participant, then they're going to kind of, unfortunately, blame the user as opposed to their software. And so we want to make sure that we're giving them the most valuable feedback that they can't really argue with, that they have to accept and go, okay, yeah, really, we need to address this, because even somebody that is highly proficient with a computer, proficient with their assistive technology, is going to be, it hasn't been successful, therefore they need to fix it. The final component, I would say, for a participant is really kind of willingness to try and fail. And I think this is true for any usability study. You're putting people in a position, you're asking them to do something that's a little off the wall or a little new, outside their comfort zone. They really got to be willing to try and just accept that, yeah, it might not work, and that's okay. And then the final thing that we feel very strongly about at Equal Entry is that these participants should be paid. This is not something that you should be looking for volunteers to try to come in and assist with, because you are looking for an educated, a computer proficient, a proficient with assistive technology. They have a specialized skill. They're providing you with valuable insight. There should be some payment, monetary kind of contribution back to them. So with that, once you kind of find the right participants, then, so what's worked, So Equal Entry, we've been working with LCI for about over a year now. And essentially what we found is when we tried to do it ad hoc, we had a lot of technical setup issues. It was how do we do this again, right? It's which technology did we need to join? How do we just set up the meetings? How do we get the technology aligned? So we've now started kind of having weekly office hours. That's cut down on the amount of kind of churn from a technology perspective. We also solely use Zoom. Zoom allows us to share the computer audio as well as the visual of the individual and their screen. So we get great facial expression from the tester that we can pick up on immediately. And we can record the audio for the screen reader as well. And we'll give an example of that in just a second. And then at Equal Entry, we're very specific about the fact that we write our scripts to be as inclusive as possible. And that's, as John was alluding to, rather than directions that say click on, right, it's activate. So they can choose which input device that they're using in order to do that. We also found, working specifically with LCI, that it was difficult for them to kind of switch back and forth between the application that they were working with and the notes or the digital information that we were providing as far as what those scripts should be on what they should do. So we have found that it's better to have a facilitator verbally tell a visually impaired, an individual with visual impairments to have that read to them so that then they can take those actions without having to switch back and forth between applications. So with that, I want to pause and I'm going to show a 2.5-minute video. And this is kind of an early session that we did with LCI. Vaughn was the person that was helping us here. And what we're going to see is she's working with the Equal Entry website. We had just done a refresh of our About page, and we had a developer and a junior tester working on it. They had given it the thumbs up, and then we had Vaughn do a quick review. For those, I'm going to quickly put back in the chat window the link to the full, well, if I can find where the chat window is. Can I ask somebody else to, where's my chat window? I want to make sure that everybody, here we go. Nope, I can't find it. It's lost in my screen somewhere. I apologize. But if somebody could resend the link to the actual PowerPoint that we have, if you want to follow along in the notes section of this slide. So the presentation notes has the full transcript for what you're about to hear. And if you are new to listening to a screen reader, this is going to be very fast. So you might want to follow along with that transcript in order to be able to understand what's going on, but I'll also give you kind of a debrief afterwards. So we all cross our fingers and hope that technology works for us today. Why don't you move to the About page and find out a little bit more about Thomas Logan.
Okay.
Our work vertical bar equal end. Banner recite visit serve our blog about contact us men about menu. Menu.
About.
Title is about vertical bar equal entry. Banner region. Skip the content about heading level 1. Site navigation region. Visited link home vertical bar equal entry. Services menu. Our work about heading level. Our history heading. Subscribe to our mailing list. Wrapping to top about heading level 1. Heading level 2. Our history. Blank. Equal entry with over the main region end.
Oh, okay.
Our history heading blank. Contribute main region. Site navigate. Search site contact us about menu. About. Leaving menus. Vertical bar equal entry.
Hold on, you were going quickly there. So
Yeah.
what just happened? So I was hearing you hear about our history.
Uh-huh.
And then you went to the end of the page.
Heading level 1.
So you said go to the About page and look for Thomas.
Heading level 2. History. Equal entry over the past 6 years. Equal entry has grown into a global company with team members joining us from throughout Europe, Asia, and the Americas. While we are fluent.
And then I think I jumped back up. Okay, hold on.
Main region end. Over Equal Entry was founded in 2012 by accessibility expert
So
Thomas.
How'd you get that main region end? What key press were you using there?
To the main region end?
Yeah, because you were reading, the focus was in the our history, and you're reading that text, and then I'm hearing an announcement of region end.
An end.
Oh, I arrowed down, or I was using the paragraph command, and I moved on too fast. That was all.
Okay.
Yeah.
So
Founded in 2012 by.
Okay, keep going. I'm just trying to follow along with what you're doing from a keyboard perspective. So And here is the first time that I really lost you.
Okay, sorry about that. So it looks like I am here, and
Heading level 2 art history.
that is the heading, and there are 2
Equal entry was found over the main region end.
paragraphs here
Over the past 6 years, equal entry.
describing the history of equal entry.
Yes.
Looks like that's it.
Okay, I'm going to say that you might have just found a bug for us. So visually what you can see on the screen right now is the equal entries about page with our history, has the 2 paragraphs, and then below it you can see that there's another title that is just barely readable of our team, and then there's images. Those images are just the very top of Thomas Logan's head. So, and when it was hitting that last page and it was going all the way to the end, you could see that there was another image, and it was of me. So there was clearly content in there that she was missing. And what, with a little bit more investigation, was identified is that we had a misuse of ARIA hidden that had misfired and was hiding the rest of the content to assistive technologies. So the automated accessibility testing that was done passed no problem, and our tester, who was using a screen reader, was tabbing to active elements and was able to find and read all the active elements on the screen. But for a native screen reader user that is just trying to navigate a page, clearly they were hitting some significant problems with the page. So it's a quick and easy fix. It was only up for a little while, I promise, but it was fascinating to me, and I thought it was a great example of how you can do some very basic testings, and get a good sense of what an individual would find, but then actually working through just running through some very specific scenarios, the big key issues, and making sure people are successful is, as I said, that gold standard of making sure something was accessible. So why don't you move to the started playing again, sorry about that. So really our lessons learned: 1, sharing the screen with the computer audio is absolutely key. We've tried this with other technologies where I couldn't hear what the screen reader was saying, and it was just all on the participant to kind of communicate what they were experiencing in their own narrative, and it just wasn't as effective. So I'm pretty versed in screen reader, so you could tell that I was allowing Vaughn to use her own speed of how she was using it, or how she wanted to use her screen reader. I was allowing her to do that, and I could follow it with experience. That's pretty easy to do and be able to understand where she was on the screen. But you really need to have that computer audio. Individual volume adjustment is something that we would love to see, because sometimes when you want the screen reader to be slightly less and pump up the volume of the individual that is participating so that you can hear what they're saying when they're talking over their screen reader, we'd love to be able to do that independent volume adjustment, but that's not there yet. So I'm putting a plug for everybody making that request to their technology vendors. And I've kind of alluded to this as far as Zoom allows me, in the recording, all you saw was Vaughn's screen. But when I was participating in that, I could see her facial expression. And that is pretty critical from surprise, frustration, confusion, right? You heard her kind of go, huh? Right? Oh, right? And in seeing the facial expression helped understand that those vocal expressions. So if those facilitators aren't used to the speed of the screen reader, it is important to ask the participants to slow down their screen reader. And again, it's just that critical ability for the facilitator to be able to hear exactly what the participant is hearing, to be able to make some judgments over what might be the problem, and being able to articulate. The other thing is we've kind of talked about is or you heard in the video, understanding what keystrokes are being used, how they're choosing to navigate at that point, why they're choosing to do that. So in general, our biggest takeaway, and I don't think we hit on this, but when we're talking about why companies don't do this type of testing, a lot of it has to do with the fact that they require that physical testing environment. So we're big believers that we want participants using their own computers. We want participants using their own assistive technology that they've customized and they set up. So really, to host your own usability kind of component and include individuals with disabilities, we really suggest investing the time to find the right participants that meet your requirements for your product, your website. You know, that what's a normal persona, or what's the target development persona, and then look at it from, okay, if the individual was with a disability, what would the requirements look like, right? Are you willing to have somebody that's brand new to assistive technology or not, right? There's various times when we've had clients, they're like, we are working on keyboard accessibility. We're not ready to work with screen readers yet. We're taking an interim step in our accessibility plans, and we're starting here and then going to move on. So making sure you match the right participants. And then we're hitting on this, right? Plan on the remote participant. And that means that the development environment has to allow for an individual at their own home to be able to access it using their personal equipment. And then it's budget the right amount of time. And I'm going to say multiple sessions. And then if you need to, cancel, because you never know, that first session, you could have total technical difficulties with just getting everything set up right to be able to get good data back. So if you have multiple sessions, then you don't feel rushed to be able to get through anything, and you can just cancel further sessions then. So, and then the final one is set expectations up front, and that is expectations with the product development team that is asking for this, as well as the participant. So it's oftentimes, we would recommend doing this type of usability study after you've done an accessibility a traditional accessibility evaluation to determine where you think an individual is going to be successful and where they might have problems. Setting that expectation up front, letting a participant know, okay, in general, this is an accessible website. There are a few areas we're going to have some gotchas. So, and I will try to warn you of that, or avoid those, or just letting you know we're going to purposely hit some of those. And just having that expectation up front allows the participant to feel a little bit more comfortable about when they do hit a stumbling block. So, and with that, I think we have made it to our Q&A.
Awesome. And folks can feel free to take themselves off mute to ask as well. I'm switching over right now to our Slack instance. I know that we did have some questions crop up in chat, so bear with me while I locate that. We had a question from Joshua Barr. Are you testing on mobile this way as well?
So we do have, so LCI has participated with doing Android as well as iOS testing with us. I will also say that I have traveled to LCI. I have the advantage of being in North Carolina with them. So I have traveled and been able to sit next to them. Honestly, I find the remote just as effective. Once we've gotten through all the hurdles with making sure that they have the right technology to cast their mobile device to the computer screen and then share out that computer screen, we're off to the races. So yeah, so we've done the iOS, Android, as well as websites, web applications. I think we did one Windows client. So we've done a whole host of things with them.
Thank you. We also had a question from Steve. I realize this is very bespoke and everyone is different, but is there a typical pricing range for facilitating testing in this way? If we wanted to make the case for to do this, I fear the first question is going to be how much?
That is an awesome point. We did not discuss ahead of time if we were talking pricing at this type of event. So I think I'm going to have to say contact John or I after. I don't know what protocol is for this. So,
you know, I'd say this one thing. I think one of the main things is we've always tried to make, at least from our usability perspective, we wanted to make it attainable for everybody. Because at the end of the day, we want to make sure that people are not doing it because of it's cost prohibitive. So we've been trying to make sure that you can do the usability that's reasonable for people for the budget. That's on the usability side. We try to do it as much as we can.
Great, thank you. Folks, feel free to go ahead again, put questions in chat, either here on Zoom when we are, or on the YouTube live feed. We'll go ahead and answer those questions either way.
I'm catching up on the chat.
Looks like we have a question from Andrew. How do you balance leading testers versus letting them organically wayfind the task? It seems there is a good amount of prep to even have the conversation.
That's an excellent question. So in the video that I showed is kind of go to the about page and look up about Thomas Logan, right? That's a pretty kind of broad. I also typically start off any session with a kind of a just general explore, right? I'm giving you a URL and I'm telling you that this is what we're going to be working with today. Why don't you just take a look around and figure out what this thing is, right? So you give somebody a URL, you don't know if it's a web application, you don't know if it's a website. So I often let them just explore for a little bit. Again, you're hearing the screen reader and going and kind of hearing how they explore, which I find pretty valuable. But it is specifically when you have a site that's a site or an application that you know is not as accessible as it really should be, then you end up having to guide a lot more. And we warn clients about that, right? As far as you want a level of accessibility to be there, to be able to be successful and be able to show a solid scenario of somebody being successful is what we try for, and what we're what it is kind of a carrot to really put in front of clients, like do good and then you get this, right? You'll have somebody be very successful and you'll have a recording of it. So it kind of goes both ways, but if it's a very accessible product, then the less leading is needed, is the best way to say that.
Okay, awesome. Next question. Have you ever tried visiting the subject at their home or a neutral location?
So I've met with LCI at their house, at their place of work. As far as going to the person's home, I can say yes in my past. So I gave the pictures of the usability testing facility. The first time that I, as a program manager, requested individuals with disabilities, we ran into lots of problems. Getting people to the testing site, the testing site's accessibility, getting the accessibility software on the computer, and essentially it was an abysmal failure. So the next usability study I did at Microsoft, I said, I want to give people computers. I'm going to preload them with our beta software that's not out to the public. It's going to be locked down so that they have access to it, but we're going to install it in their house. And to my manager's credit, they go, okay, how many computers do you need? I mean, it's Microsoft. Okay, fine. So here I load up like brand new machines still in their box, putting them in my car. I'm like, somebody's going to stop me, right? Like, nope. So I did put them at individuals' homes. They were people that we had found through advocacy organizations for the blind. And honestly, we didn't get great data. As far as of the participants, only one had really advanced computer skills to the point where they felt comfortable utilizing this system. And the idea was that they would have it at their home, and because of the ability to preload the beta software, it had to be a pretty powerful machine at the time. It had to be locked down from a Microsoft privacy perspective. But we said, hey, you can install your own assistive technology. You can customize it. We're going to give you lots of time with this. Came back later and no, like, again, only one participant had actually used it. Everybody else was just kind of like, yeah, I turned it on. Didn't use it in any way. So I have been to participants' house. I don't really see a huge difference between somebody's comfort level with being in their home versus their comfort level being at their work environment. And then working remotely, they could be at work or at home, doesn't matter to me.
Yeah, actually, I have a quick question for Heather. Heather, I'm actually, I know that our schedules have been kind of a little wacky the last several weeks when we started working from home. But have you worked with the team at home?
Yeah.
You have. How was that experience? How was it different?
Pretty much the same, right?
Yeah.
I mean, so I've worked with Vaughn and Tristan and several others, both remotely and face-to-face, when they're at home, when they're at LCI. The key is having it be their own system, having it be their comfort level with their assistive technology, and thereby as you throw at them something new from a usability perspective.
Thank you.
And kind of building off that, we have a question of how do you overcome problem when testers, how do you overcome a problem of testers getting nervous when observed?
That is a little bit of time, and it's just rapport, I think. So hopefully I'm a welcoming voice and it's not too painful to listen to me as we go through this webinar. But it's really, part of that is setting expectations early on with the participants, as far as you got to be willing to try and fail, because that's what we're looking for, right? If you succeed beautifully, that's interesting data, but it's really interesting where and how you fail. So that's what we're kind of going for. So they got to just be willing to do that and comforted by knowing that, hey, every failure that they make is a failure that the actual general public won't be making, because we're going to be able to fix it.
I just want to pause for a thank you that I just saw in the comments. Heather, your excitement and passion is contagious. Thank you for this information and sharing your experiences. This is great, and I agree with that. So I just wanted to make sure that you knew that that was happening in the chat. Another question that we have, how long do you recommend your testing session be per participant?
We hold it to pretty much an hour or less. And that is, at that point, it gets draining. The shorter sessions typically work better. An hour block allows us to get through any technical issues and still get valuable time. So shorter, you might end up just having technical issues and not getting to any data. So we block it for an hour, and if we get through, we can call it early and thank everybody for the great insight, and we're going to go run off and go fix things. Or use the full hour, but then cut it off and say, okay, we'll rejoin. And again, it's the having multiple sessions really does help us to be able to pick up and revisit things.
And one thing, sorry, I want to comment on that. I think one of the good things is that you also have a consistency. Heather, you have a set schedule every week. You're going to be doing this testing also, which makes it consistent for the team, which I think is great.
Yeah, definitely cuts down with the technical issues.
Yeah.
Do you have some more questions that are coming through from chat? But I see that Dan has his hand raised, so I just wanted to pause and allow Dan. Go ahead, take yourself off of mute and ask your question.
My question is, thanks. Do you do Braille testing? In my current job, which ends Monday, I've been advocating that people need to test with Braille displays, because I know when I've done iOS testing of an app or a website, I've caught things where something might work with voice over speech, but not with Braille, with a Braille display.
I don't think we have done any specific Braille testing with LCI, but again, the participants that I talked about were early on in my Microsoft career. The one that was the most computer proficient was a Braille user. So he used a combination of JAWS as well as his Braille display.
Yeah, that's what I do. JAWS, NVDA, voiceover, TalkBack.
It's multiple inputs, right? The more advantages you have to get the information you need. So yeah, I love it, but I don't think we've done specific. And I think it would be interesting to look at a usability study where we just did Braille without the assistance of the screen reader. I'm not sure what it would be interesting to get some data points as far as the general public, as far as how often a Braille display is used in conjunction with a screen reader or in isolation, and then be able to build usability tests based on that.
You could look at the WebAIM website. They might have statistics there.
Okay. Yeah, and actually everybody on the team, I think everyone on the team except myself actually knows Braille, and they have multiple Braille displays on the team. So that's definitely something you can put out.
So they might have been using it without me realizing it, and that's fine, right? If that's information that they have access to, but they haven't specifically pointed out that they're using it.
Another question we have, how many testers with without disabilities do you recommend? And do you analyze the result together?
I didn't see who asked that question. For analyze the results together. That's I think he's referring to equal entry and LCI analyzing the test together.
I wonder, C1, feel free to take yourself off mute to clarify. I read that as the people with and without disability analyzing those results together. But that's just my interpretation of somebody else's question.
That's my question. So like, I've never have experience testing with testers with disabilities. So I'm just thinking like, in the future, if I, incorporate that, and how would I analyze, data, from different groups of testers?
So from my perspective, the best user scenarios are going to be the ones that you're doing with both sets of groups, right? So if you have a key scenario, right? Logging into a web application, being able to search for something specifically and find an article, read a full article, right? Those are very basic tasks that you can give to any user. And you should see the same success rate between an individual that's part of a general usability study and participants with disabilities, right? The goal would be to be able to say, okay, this scenario was, well, not successful for anyone. This is confusing and we need to go back to the drawing board from a design perspective. Or, okay, this class of user had no problem with it, but individuals with disabilities, be it vision impairment, mobility impairment, cognitive, something along those lines, was having failure issues here. So as far as the number of participants, that really kind of depends on the product and kind of what data you want to get out of it. But from a cost perspective, somebody brought that up before, right? There's always cost, time, and the ability to take that feedback in. So if I can get you wonderful results with 25 participants, but it's gonna take me 3 months and we just missed the ship window, so you can't actually make any changes based on that feedback, then that's not a good study. So you're really trying to narrow that down to, well, how much time do I really have to be able to influence and be able to make changes? So sometimes it's one, right? One's better than none. This is the way I look at it. If I can get more, I will. But it's really when can I get them in? How can I do the test and get it back so that developers can make change?
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, great question.
Next one, we have a series, 3 questions. So do you also engage user testing at design or prototype phase? How many test scripts do you normally start with at initial stages? And what's the best practice what's the best practice duration for a session? Are there any privacy consent requirements for recording video and audio?
Okay, 3 parts. I found it in the chat, so.
I was gonna say, if you'd like me to repeat any part of that while you're answering, happy to do that as well.
I appreciate that, but I think I found it. So
Great.
I will say prototype phase is difficult because normally you have some very rough images that you can't interact with a screen reader with. So it's a more theoretical kind of conversation at that level and reliance on traditional accessibility consulting knowledge to guide a development team. So I would say that usability studies with individuals with disabilities are a little later in the process. There are usability studies that are done with tests or prototypes, but it's normally paper-based type of stuff or image-based. So that is one kind of area that you just kind of have more of a conversation with a participant if you're going to do that. How many testing scripts do you normally start with the initial phase? Again, it's how much time do we have and where the developers can be influenced. So if you're just starting with a client, we typically want to say that a minimum of 4 scenarios, really give them a taste for what this would kind of be like and get them through. And then you build from there. But there are other clients that start off with, no, there are 15 key things that we absolutely have to make sure are right. And we're going to have the different teams all dedicated to lined up. Once you give us data, we're going to go and fix it. And it's like, okay, well, we'll get through as much. And then it's setting up those timings. So I think that covered the 2. The last one being privacy consent. Absolutely, yes. So we have non-disclosure agreements with our clients, and we have a partner agreement with LCI that includes that non-disclosure. We have the agreement between LCI and us for being able to record those videos and share those with assets with our clients so that they can see the full experience, or we can cut various videos down to a specific issue for them.
Awesome, great. John, this one's directed specifically to you. Do you have testers who can test with speech recognition technology?
Yeah, so we do. We also have people who use Dragon, natural speak. So we do have people who use that as well, and we do offer that as well.
Great. Nick, Karen, that's all I'm showing right now that I see with the questions from chat. Do you see anything from Twitter or any in chat that I've missed, or any on YouTube?
Nope, I haven't seen anything else.
Great. We'll go ahead and just pause. Again, thank you for your wonderful insights, and thank you for taking the time to answer the questions, and also for your wonderfully prepared presentation. This is very insightful and helpful, just to learn about usability testing with folks with disabilities. Let's see if we did have another question. What would you say are some of the biggest challenges in communicating discovered issues with developers?
Honestly, once we get to having a user with disability and a recording of them struggling, it's an easy conversation for developers. When it's a issue that was identified through an automated testing tool or an accessibility consultant, I mean, I consider myself very, very educated and very adept, but they're going to still look at it and go, really? Is that true? I'm going to try to argue, right? When you have an individual with disability that is truly struggling and it's so obvious, they're very motivated to fix that. So really, I haven't had a big challenge once it's identified by an individual with a disability. And I think that's one of the most powerful components of this. So with that, John, do you want to finish this off?
Yeah, for sure. I think, our hope from this presentation is that, you leave here seeing the value in including professionals with disabilities in the usability testing process. And then also some of the best practices that you may have learned from here. I think one of the ones that Heather really pointed out was the importance of allowing subjects to use their own technology and in their own environment of choice. So I think those are in those remote environments. So those are some of the key takeaways right there. And then also there's organizations like LCI and other organizations like ourselves across the country who I urge you guys to tap into to access professionals. And then also, it's important to partner for this type of standard testing. So hopefully you guys can take these away with you guys, and we really appreciate you guys giving us this platform.
Awesome. I think we'll go ahead and close it out with this last question. We are almost at time for final thoughts. We have a last question. Do you have any tips for neurotypical people to get used to testing with blind or low vision subjects?
John, do you want to take that one or you want me to?
You can.
Okay. So honestly, I don't know if it's any different than any other usability subjects. As far as I would encourage you to be honest about yourself as far as disclosing, letting the participant know what has worked well for you in the past, what hasn't, what might be some areas of concern, and being very open. Specifically, if you're talking with somebody that is raising their hand and asking to help improve the accessibility of a product, they're already eager and they want to be there to help. So if there is ways that they can help communicate that, right, then just be upfront and honest and have that dialogue. I don't know if that was overly helpful or not, but that's how I would approach it.
I think that answer, Heather, answers a lot of things, right? It's us just being as authentic and honest with others that we can be. So that's a good.
Absolutely. Just want to echo what everybody's already saying in chat. This was a great session. Thank you both so much, Heather and John. We really appreciate you joining us and sharing your insights with us. Yeah.
I have truly enjoyed being here and getting to know the Chicago Alley meetup. And while we're dealing with the Corona-19 and everybody is changing the world, right, this will always be part of my memories with Corona-19. And one of my big hopes is really that as we're seeing more people work remotely, that this is going to become more accustomed and that society is going to accept it more. And then it's just going to make lives for individuals with disabilities so much more better. So great. Thank you all. Appreciated the time.
You guys.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, everybody, just a reminder, we will go ahead and post the recording on YouTube. Once we close this out, we'll also be adding a transcript to this as well. So thanks everybody for joining us from across the globe. Thanks for joining us on Accessibility Chai. And again, follow us on Twitter. Have a good evening.